What happened? Hey, you remember last week when I said how unreasonably excited I was to watch this series? Well, that came to a screeching halt when I looked up the name of this next arc, the Shibuya Incident. Now, I know what you're thinking. Names are names. Anime is anime, and every One Piece arc sounds like something you'd order at a cheesecake factory. But you're telling me none of the frankly psychotic and unprecedented events that preceded this arc of Jujutsu Kaisen has earned it the title of Incident? That whatever this Shibuya thing is, it will make everything that came before seem trivial in retrospect.
I don't believe you.
Or at least I almost didn't until I opened my phone and saw a frankly intimidating amount of messages warning me that I'm not ready. And so now, maybe I believe the hype a little bit. Whatever, Season 2 has lived up to the hype so far, but will Shibuya be the first time a preceding arc has fallen short? Or will all of the people hounding me with messages be proven correct, rendering me little more than a trembling mass of excitement, nerves, and shock? Something tells me, worryingly, you guys all know the answer to that already. I'm totally not Mark, and this is Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, The Shibuya Incident.
You are my special.
Okay, now that I've dipped my toes into this Shibuya Incident, I think I understand why it's earned its name, but also, no I don't, because there are dozens of fucking incidents all over this arc worthy of that title. Let's start off what is, I'm sure, going to be a really stressful video with an episode that is, in hindsight, an oasis of happiness amidst a blood-drenched desert. Episode 6 was really nice, albeit not at all the sort of episode I was expecting within an arc as famous and exciting as this one. But after looking into it, it turns out that this is a part of the story that was repurposed from an earlier portion of the manga. But even so, I think I might have picked up on something significant here, an element that might set Yuji apart from virtually everyone else in the cast. He doesn't have a narrative shadow. No emotional scar fueling his actions, he is just good. Now, that might seem obvious, if not slightly reductive, but trust me, it has implications. Particularly in a story like Jujutsu Kaisen that's filled with nuanced characters moving due to their own personal struggles. You see, Yuji's ability to do what he believes is right, regardless of others' opinions, isn't only admirable or rare in society, it's what sparks Yuko's epiphany about herself. She sees Yuji as someone worth loving, but also recognizes due to this that she views herself in the same way others view her. It's a small moment, but I think it could be the first breadcrumb leading to something much bigger regarding the question Geto poses within this story. Is a soul entirely separate to the body it inhabits, or are they intrinsically connected, unable to be separated? I have a lot of thoughts and predictions concerning this one question and its possible implications, but I'll save those for later in the video. First, we gotta address the giant mech monster in the room. This fight might have seemed jarring to some, and look, I totally get why. Jujutsu Kaisen has always adhered to a specific kind of combat, one defined by weapons, curse techniques, and the occasional bromance-powered beatdown when the occasion calls for it. But I love this narrative choice not because it was flashy, unexpected, or even really novel, but because it proves that what makes Jujutsu Kaisen's fights distinct isn't their visual flair. It's how phenomenally and consistently they're structured. In other words, this fight isn't just consistent with what came before, it's a warning for what's to come. Now, I understand that might sound crazy considering we're being asked to accept that Mechamaru built a kaiju mech monster in his spare time, but truthfully, this works for me on multiple levels. For context, I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other about mech battles specifically. To me, a fight's quality isn't dictated by how it looks, but rather why it happens the way it does. In Mechamaru's case, the revelation that he's the mole leaking information was a shock, but motivation-wise, it made total sense. Just like Yuko, who saw herself as unworthy of love, Mechamaru believed his physical condition made him unworthy of connection, leading him to do the unthinkable, risking the lives of everyone he pretended not to care about, not because he was a heartless machine undeserving of love, but because of a painfully human insecurity. Having made a deal with the devil of this universe, Mechamaru sold crucial information and his soul for the chance to lead a normal life, and he fought for it. This is going to become a trend in this video, but even in this fight, there were countless instances both for Mahito and Mekamaru that caught me off guard, convincing me it was done only for it to continue into further insanity, all the while telling a terrific story. In Mekamaru's case, the mech he pilots isn't just a battle gimmick, it's a reflection of everything he's been carrying both following his Traitors Pack's creation and throughout his life. It represents the sheer scale of his insecurities, the weight of his regrets, and ultimately, it's the key to his eventual downfall. For the very first time, Mekamaru didn't fight remotely. Because he received everything he needed and dreamed of, he fought in person, something he would never have done originally, and that was what sealed his fate. And as Mahito tore through his steel cocoon, peeling away his defenses piece by piece, what remained wasn't a monstrous traitor, it was a vulnerable, regretful person desperately trying to atone for his sins. In a nutshell, this fight sets the tone for everything to come, telling us that the battles in this arc will not hold back, and boy do they not hold back. They'll be intricate, brutal, and packed with a dizzying number of moving parts, but more than that, they'll be defined by the flaws of their combatants, their motivations, their abilities, and unexpectedly, even their locations. To say that this arc blew every expectation I had out of the water would be the understatement of a lifetime, because what we're about to venture into, my friends, was something unlike anything I'd experienced before. Of the countless layers of complexity underpinning the events of this Shibuya section, one choice stood out to me as inspired, presenting this arc less like a naturally unfolding story and more like the declassification of a sensitive case file. The title Incident doesn't just refer to an event, it suggests something that has already happened. Just as the Cursed Womb arc kicked off with an official timestamp, description, and consequence, like a case file report, the Shibuya Incident is structured around specific times and locations, as if compiled from eyewitness testimony after the fact, making it, for me, so damn fucking cool. I mean, okay. It all begins one Halloween night in Shibuya, with the investigation commencing at 8:14 p.m. once a series of mysterious veils drop across the city, enshrouding, imprisoning, and ultimately leading to the slaughter of countless innocent lives. As they scramble for answers, one honored name is called upon. At 8:31 p.m., Satoru Gojo enters the veil alone, and 9 minutes later, he discovers why. Okay, I need to vent for a second because this was some of the wildest, most captivating shit I've ever seen in my life. Okay, Akutami straight up puts God into a fight against 3 normies and somehow convinces me that this is a real battle and had me saying stuff like, okay, so there's no way for Gojo to win here. How's he gonna do this? He's not gonna lose, is he? I found this fight so fucking exciting that for the next few minutes, I want you to know that all the notes I took to inform the review of this fight amounted to 2 straight pages of me screaming. Like literally, it is for like 2 pages. So here I go. Episode 9 opens uniquely, with handheld shots of various familiar characters answering a single question: what do you think of Satoru Gojo? And while descriptors like teacher, egotistical, and strongest were thrown around, I couldn't help but think back to when Gojo truly came to grips with the scope of his powers and proclaimed, "I alone am the honored one," making it all the more fitting that one word never featured: friend. To me, this reinforced his earlier statement and acted as an ideal framing device for this entire battle. A battle he needs to fight alone. Throughout this series, while Gojo's powers have been a source of reassurance for humanity, they've also pushed his own humanity aside. They've terrified curses while also pushing his allies towards madness. And in this scene, despite having numerous capable comrades at the ready, the isolation his unfathomable power demands only further serves to make my point for me.
Need a hand.
But who gives a shit, because that shot was awesome! Gojo wrecks their collective shit so badly and so consistently that I genuinely, in this fight, started to feel sorry for the guy that literally sets people on fire because he felt like it. But okay, let's address the elephant in the room first. Any fight involving Gojo runs into the same fundamental narrative problem. How do you make a fight interesting when one side has no realistic chance of struggling? Gojo vs. Jogo in episode 7 offered a comedic answer to this this very question by emphasizing how comedically outmatched Jogo was. Now that's fine for a laugh, but when it comes to creating genuine, authentic drama and tension, Gojo presents an infinitely more complicated problem to solve. So what was Akutami's solution? Well, he didn't create some convoluted way for someone stronger to come along. He orchestrated one of the most impressive fight scenes I've ever witnessed. When Gojo arrives in the underground, it's as he suspects, packed full of innocent people, and that's the point. Relying on this false sense of security such immense power brings to Gojo, Geto formulated not just a battle, but a tactical puzzle the likes of which will determine the fate of humankind. And it works. If Gojo wants to pop Infinite Void, he can't unless he wants to crush every non-sorcerer between it and the barrier keeping him inside. It doesn't matter that Jogo, Hanami, and Choso aren't strong enough because they're not trying to overpower him, they're trying to trap him. And the most compelling part of this all is this strategy, it necessitates their compliance too, to not use their domains. This isn't a one-sided affair. If they use their domains, the civilians they're leveraging also get sucked in, die, leading to an immediate checkmate from Gojo. They've got one shot to outplay the unbeatable force without him ever realizing how deep they've set the hook. There's just one teeny tiny problem.
I'm saying I'm actually shocked you would ever have thought you could beat me with this loser shit.
Gojo notices. And then it happens. Hanami, one of the most terrifying curses we've ever seen so far in the series, it gets obliterated like an afterthought. No hesitation, no drawn-out struggle, no drama, just an asparagus execution. And Jogo and Choso, they're still in this. Initially, they were there to trap Gojo. Now they're just trying to survive. They're trapped in there with him. Their only saving grace is time, because it isn't just a fight, it is a waiting game. Between the chaos, we cut to Geto and his crew playing Mahjong. And this is a wonderful detail because this is far more than just a throwaway scene, it's the perfect visual metaphor for what's taking place. The way Geto orchestrates this entire operation isn't brute force, it's deception, bluffing, risk assessment, and high-stakes gambles. Every single move he's made has been calculated to push Gojo into the most compromised mental state possible. Why? To make him vulnerable to one final checkmate, the prison realm. This plan, it flipped a switch in my brain. My third eye opened, forcing me to conclude this was the most excited I've ever been watching an arc of anything in years. And it's not just because of the fight, it's because of this. While I've been placing emphasis on these battles because, well, I mean, look at them. During my watch through, I was acutely aware several other stories were running in parallel. Nanami was leading his own group on the outskirts, Ijichi doing his own. Also, Yuji and Mei Mei have their infiltration of Meiji Shrine Station before moving closer to Shibuya later. All of these aren't just their own independent stories, they all fundamentally inform, bounce off of, and flow into and out of, except that one.
Are you sure about that?
Each other. Case in point, Yuji's arc is fantastic on its own. It highlights how competent he's become even while fighting alongside Mei Mei. Her willingness to leave him to handle the curse in the station isn't just practical, it shows her confidence in his abilities. It's a great mini-story where Yuji crushes a grasshopper with sheer intellect, a moment that resurfaces all of the memories of the Junpei arc and teaches him Mahito's name. A sure bit of foreshadowing for an inevitable conflict. But the moment that made me lose my mind was this.
Are you okay?
Everyone turned into monsters, and then they all got on the train.
When those monsters poured onto the tracks, when they turned what was supposed to be a Gojo power showcase into a moral nightmare, Okay, look, I promise I'm not exaggerating here. I got so excited by this arc, by this choice, and its location case file structure that I literally stopped watching the show, researched Shibuya Station, pulled up several 3D maps of the area, plotted character movements, and opened Google Maps and Google Street View just to track the action like some kind of deranged private investigator. I didn't see my family for 3 days, but it was fucking awesome. And you know what? But despite never having been to Tokyo in my life, I am unreasonably confident right now that I could navigate Shibuya Station in the dark from Inokashira Line's Avenue Gate all the way to the JR Saikyo Line's New South Gate. And if you don't understand that, congratulations for touching grass in the last week. Do I regret saying all of this out loud? Maybe, but none of that matters because Akutami somehow convinced me that Gojo could actually lose this fight. Mahito's entrance flips the entire scenario on its head. The battlefield now is no longer just a fight, it's a slaughterhouse. And Gojo, he's forced into the one move he swore he wouldn't use.
Domain expansion. Infinite void.
This is singularly one of the most insanely awesome character sequences, circumstances, whatever you want to call it, I've seen a character push through. 1,000 transfigured humans dead in 299 seconds. And amidst this chaos, all my mind could do was flash back to episode 5 of Hidden Inventory, when Gojo was pushed to a point of moral confusion only for Geto to pull him back from the brink. I thought, is that what Geto wants here? To recreate that moment? To overwhelm Gojo with moral ambiguity? Push him to the edge? Make him do something unforgivable? Should I even be thinking of that flashback right now? But honestly, I found it difficult not to. Even when Gojo does achieve the impossible, saving everyone while killing all the monsters, the entire scene is underscored by the same chaotic jazz number that underpinned the beginning of Geto's fall during his fight with Toji. It's like they want me to think of Geto and the relationship he once shared with Gojo. And this is where the genius comes full circle and makes a big genius circle. During this fight, Gojo demonstrates the root of each and every quality that was used to describe him by his peers in the opening of episode 9. We learn why he mentored Yuji into maximizing his abilities without a curse technique. His physical prowess with such an approach is staggering. We can see why his ego was called into question by Nanami when he calls their carefully curated strategy that does corner him, quote, loser shit. And as he overcomes their supposed impossible to solve scenario, we all get to see firsthand why the title Strongest doesn't even remotely come close to describing what he truly is. How could anyone possibly hope to hold this one unstoppable force down for one solid minute?
Hey, Satoru.
For me, what made this fight so thrilling wasn't whether Gojo was in danger of losing to these three or not. Let's be real, that was never really the point. What got my blood pumping was Geto's demeanor. Not once did he look uncertain, not once did he seem like he was gambling. And even when faced with the scope of Gojo's control over the situation, he always remained utterly convinced victory was inevitable. And the reason why is simple. His strategy never relied on Gojo's ego or even his overwhelming strength. His final gambit hinged on something Gojo had long since convinced himself was gone forever. His friend.
How could you possibly tell?
Or not. Okay, I'm sorry. What in the ever-loving shit fuck am I seeing right now? Is Geto dead? Gojo killed him? He didn't kill him? What am I seeing here? What the fuck is going on? What I meant to say is, in storytelling, a great reveal is the holy grail. Pull it off and you don't just shock your audience, you hook them. But not all surprises are created equal, and what separates the great from the lazy, bad, or boring is one key principle. It's not about shock, it's not about awe, it's not even really about excitement. It's retroactive realization. Or if you want it in simpler terms, the aha moment. That rush of insight that hits you all at once, flooding your brain and recontextualizing everything that you thought you knew. To nail this, the foreshadowing has to be just right. Too much and it's predictable. Too little and it feels cheap. But Jujutsu Kaisen consistently lands in that sweet spot. And with Geto, the truth was hiding in plain sight the entire time. In Jujutsu Kaisen's Hidden Infantry, we're offered a comprehensive overview of Geto's nuanced descent into disillusionment, from virtuous student to genocidal maniac. However, if you look past his heinous acts, an important detail to recognize is that no matter what point you look to in his story, his driving forces have remained consistently centered around his principles, to address the root cause of curses in order to build a society free of fear. He despises regular humans, certainly, but he hated curses more. Now, look at what's happening in Shibuya. Curse-sensitive civilians are being slaughtered. Geto, a man who built his entire ideology on freeing Jujutsu sorcery from this cycle, is supposedly orchestrating an event that does the exact opposite. While it may seem partially in line with his original vision, the actual Suguru Geto would never have truly allied himself with these creature curses. And in the end, he never did. So, this is where the long payoff to Gojo's build-up comes into full effect, because now that he's out of the picture and no longer able to style on fools with reckless abandon, suddenly all of the enemies that we thought were, unserious seem a whole lot more terrifying. Suddenly, all of the responsibility he shouldered for over a decade is placed firmly on the shoulders of everybody else. And boy, do they feel—
Hello, biatches. I'm back.
There's something in my ear.
Boy, that episode 9 analysis sure was long, haha. I'm sure the editing team is not tired at all. Lol.
I would scream with excitement now, but honestly,
I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious.
this is the Shibuya Incident's second act, a section of the story that traditionally has presented writers across time with countless headaches ranging from slow pacing to uninteresting scenarios that feel more like obligation than exploration, sucking all of the drama out in the process. But from my perspective, the second act of the Shibuya Incident and the effects of Gojo's neutralization carry with them complexity and promise. Suddenly, the focus isn't on one character anymore, it's on dozens. Some we know, some we don't know, crammed into a location with hundreds of different rooms, passageways, and streets filled with terrifying monsters. However, while this was exciting to see, I also had my reservations. Having a detailed story and structure offers tons of obvious benefits, but if nothing can cut through that narrative noise from time to time, the story can start to feel tedious. Thankfully, however, Akutami seems to circumvent that issue in a fashion not entirely dissimilar to one of my favorite shows, Game of Thrones, seasons 1 to 5 specifically. A story which managed to feel both enormous in scope and complexity one minute, and the next, with a single push or a knowing glance from the right character, forces us to refocus our attention and narrow the scope of what we needed to pay attention to. Jujutsu Kaisen's second season isn't as complicated as Game of Thrones, but it features the same advantages and potential pitfalls all the same. Therefore, Akutami needed a character that could cut through that noise, reset the complexity, and interject much needed energy and progression back into the plot. And it's just that easy, folks. Once Yuji leaps into action and screams from the rooftops like a madman to inform everyone of the news, the story takes a much more mysterious, sinister, and nihilistic tone, with characters like Nanami, once they learn of Gojo's fate, are crushed by the implications of such a revelation. And boy, does that sentiment hold water. With heroes unaware of what's lurking around the maze-like tunnels and streets of Shibuya, and a villainous group that seems to fracture further and further by the second, the level of uncertainty packed into each second is infectious. All our heroes can do is focus on what their next move is, and right now, it's tearing down those veils.
I mean, these youngsters today have no pity for the elderly.
With Gojo gone, the fights that follow are forced to take on a whole new dimension beyond simple power. And nowhere is this clearer than in Yuji and Megumi's battle against the mustache sorcerer, Awasaka. At first, Yuji's raw ability seems more than enough, and to the outside observer, it looks like he and Megumi have the upper hand here. But when Yuji's strikes fail to leave an impact and even Megumi's demon dogs can't seem to hurt their opponent, it becomes clear that while brute strength alone was enough to impress others in this arc, on this occasion, it won't be enough. But when it comes to careful observation and experimentation, Megumi is on another level. I like this for several reasons. Naturally, I love that my boy Megumi is being offered a chance to shine here, but more than that, I like how this fight illustrates what a world without Gojo has to rely on: teamwork. Yuji's got power and heart in spades, but a sword, no matter how sharp, is totally worthless without a mind behind it. And that's what this fight is. Megumi comes across as a genius, deliberately throwing out a bluff designed to be seen through, allowing him to see through his formidable enemy's technique, inversion, whereby weak attacks become strong and strong attacks become weak. This isn't just a test of strength, it's a test of reasoning, and Yuji, for all of his natural abilities, bless his heart, would have been lost in this fight without Megumi there to see the truth. It's a fight that perfectly highlights the balance between these two budding sorcerers, while interestingly emphasizing exactly what Ino lacked during his side of the conflict. Ino is strong. He knows that. He knows that his technique alone is more than enough to qualify him for a grade 1 position, but that's not where his insecurities lie. What he believes holds him back, what he actively and earnestly seeks to correct, is his intellect during combat. It's specifically why he admires Nanami and strives for his approval specifically. Because to him, Nanami isn't just a strong sorcerer, he's the total package. And if Ino is ever going to reach that level, he can't just win, he has to prove he can make the right decisions too. And with the words of Nanami echoing in his mind and the trust in his own powers acting as the bedrock, he chooses to quickly eliminate this threat instead of regrouping with the others. And through doing so, unfortunately, sealed his own fate. For while he might have been correct that a lack of strength was never a factor holding him back personally, it was that confidence in his abilities that threw off his mental calculus in this crucial moment. For what emerges to face him isn't just power, it's a ghost. Holy shitting okay, look. I know I said that I maxed out my shock and awe meter, but in that moment I saw Toji take control of his body against the will of Ogami and her grandson, 2 wires in my brain connected. Okay, I'm going to try to explain. Hayao Miyazaki and many of the best storytellers of times past and present reliably advise those who wish to create great stories to venture out into the real world and pay attention. They advise us to do this for 2 reasons. First is to understand the how something functions. Finding Nemo's production took this rather seriously by requiring their in-house art team to study marine biology and take scuba diving lessons. This was all in an effort to teach them how these characters moved and how they chose to live. The second reason, however, concerns the why a character moves and acts the way that they do. And that, my friends, is a far more subtle and crucial lesson to implement than the prior. Marlin the clownfish living in a sea anemone is a nice detail that is true to reality, but the moment you realize why he switched his home from the edge of the reef to its current sheltered location is the instant that fish stops being a 3D computer model and becomes a realistic representation of adult trauma. And that right there is the magic of great storytelling. And while I'm sure the tribulations of some fish might seem worlds apart from the emotional levers that inform characters like Toji, I assure you, they are one in the same. I mean, they both had kids that they were trying to shelter from the pain that they felt, but jokes aside, this realistic human quality is so profoundly integrated within the fabric of Jujutsu Kaisen's story, it manages to manifest itself as potentially the most consequential mechanic this story has ever seen.
You once told me you thought the soul exists before the body does. But really, the body is part of the soul, and the soul is part of the body.
As established by Mahito earlier in Season 1, the body and soul are 2 separate components of a human being. It's this established belief which facilitates the reveal that Geto, the real Geto, is still in there somewhere trying to get out. And while this might be fascinating to totally not Geto, the plot point doesn't rear its head again until episode 12, when the granny sorcerer Ogami is shocked to find that the husk of Toji Zenin that she imbued her grandson with has begun to make decisions all on its own. If this wasn't clear enough, she even goes as far as to explicitly state that she only resurrected the body and not the soul, leading me to believe that when it comes to certain key individuals, the body is inextricably connected to the soul. But the question is, why? Well, I actually have a theory, and it's tied specifically to a narrative concept appropriately referred to as the character's ghost. And fittingly, Toji in this instance is the perfect example. A character's ghost is an emotional injury that, though suffered long ago, continues to haunt them to their present day. An emotional injury that typically falls into one of 3 categories: grief, grievance, or, in the case of Toji, guilt. As stated by his parents, and even by himself really, Toji wasn't gifted with anything other than heightened senses. He didn't just fail to inherit the cursed technique of his family, he was born without any cursed energy at all. And once discovered, Toji's family ridiculed and outcast him for the rest of his days. That is Toji's ghost. The emotional injury that informed the very man he became. An injury that made his body valuable to someone like Ogami. In other words, the qualities that made Toji's body a desirable husk for her to resurrect are inextricably tied to the soul of Toji. Without that internal sense of failure to push him past his limits of what everyone thought possible, Toji's body would never have been valuable to her in the first place. In Toji's case, you cannot have this incredible body without his wounded soul. And the same is true perhaps to varying degrees for the likes of Mai, Maki, Megumi, Yuta, Mei Mei, and even Suguru Geto. As I mentioned earlier, the ghost of Toji's character was informed by guilt. Geto's could possibly be informed by grievance. A turning point in his life, as seen during Hidden Inventory, came about due to two significant events. His decisive defeat at the hands of Toji, a type of person he would grow to utterly despise, and the sense of abandonment he felt when Gojo's power increase forced him into isolation and ultimately intense radicalization. By the time we see Geto during the events of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, his demeanor and speech pattern are almost unrecognizable to that which we saw him brandish as a teenager. And so, it is my belief that what is being hinted at right now is that Suguru Geto's soul is inextricably connected to his body for the very same reasons. Ogami was incapable of isolating Toji's soul from his, because fundamentally, when it comes to characters like Geto, Toji, Maki, or even Mekamaru, these are characters whose physical prowess and current standing are informed not from natural ability, but from the narrative ghosts that possess them to do the incredible and awful, all in the name of healing the emotional injury that refuses to go away. God, the story is so fucking good. Well, not so cool for Ichichi, who's looking like Swiss cheese right now, but man, Akutami just keeps creating amazing scenarios, doesn't he? What follows this unsettling discovery isn't just another fight, it's a masterclass in badassery and how to escalate tension, define character, and deliver the sweet, juicy nectar all of us anime nerds crave, catharsis. This sequence is framed as a traditional shonen rescue, but what makes it extraordinary is how it manipulates audience expectation and digs into the psychology of its characters. Maki stepping up into a leadership role is a crucial narrative move. In this moment, she's not just making the tactical decision to send Nobara and Akari towards Ijichi, she's positioning them for survival. This is in line with what K.M. Weiland describes as character arc integration, where plot decisions are not just about forwarding the narrative, but revealing something intrinsic about the characters in question. In Maki's case, her strength isn't just a form of combat ability, it's in the very same qualities highlighted during her stint in the Kyoto Exchange event. She's a born leader, brimming with confidence in the most uncertain and unsteady of circumstances.
Oh, it's a woman in a suit!
Haruta is one of the most unnerving antagonists introduced, and Akutami's choice to frame him as an irrational force is precisely what makes him so terrifying. Unlike other antagonists whose techniques can be deduced and countered, Haruta doesn't even fully understand his own abilities, positioning him as someone utterly impossible to read, and that uncertainty underpins a staggering sense of unease. In Robert McKee's book Story, he emphasizes that antagonists are most effective when they present an oppositional force that directly challenges the hero's strengths. Haruta isn't incredibly strong, but he's unpredictable. Nobara is a master of psychological warfare in battle. We've seen her confronted with horrific circumstances countless times and not once lose her resolve. But Haruta's motivations are too hollow for even her mind games to manipulate. This creates a narrative inversion where the protagonist's strengths are momentarily made ineffective. And she doesn't give up because she's a fucking monster. I love Nobara. I hope that's clear. This moment serves as a critical character study. Under pressure, Akari's instinct is to flee, while Nobara's is to stand her ground and fight no matter what. This distinction, as small as it may seem, highlights two opposing survival mechanisms, the pragmatist and the warrior. Nobara's immediate reaction to grasp at her hammer despite her concussed state is more than just stubbornness, it's a perfect embodiment of her philosophy. She isn't just fighting for survival, she's fighting to assert her existence, reinforcing her character's broader story arc concerning Sayori. She will not be forced to run by those who scare her.
some boss music.
You know, I'm a married straight man, and I swear to God, Nanami's entering here had me questioning my entire existence. This guy storms in like the fucking Batman. Number of allies and their locations. That's all he wants to know. It's all he really says. He is clinical, ruthless, terrifying. This is peak superhero. Well, okay, maybe not superhero. He's kind of like... Batman's a close... Yeah, Batman. Between Gojo and Nanami, this show really has me struggling between who the best boy is, because honestly, that debate alone is probably a 3-hour video in and of itself. So let me get back to the analysis.
The number of your allies and their locations.
Nanami's arrival and subsequent fight is the payoff of an entire setup. Nanami, it seems, has already been emotionally compromised by Ijichi's injury. His usual clinical detachment is gone, making this entrance not just about saving Nobara and Akari, it's about bringing balance to the universe. One heavy fist at a time. Nanami operates as an extension of justice in this moment, and I am here for it, by the way. Unlike Gojo, who indulges in power, or Yuji, who fights with his emotions, we've only ever really seen Nanami fight with surgical precision. But this is a Nanami unlike any we've seen before.
You don't get it, son. This isn't a mud hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon.
His sheer presence shifts the power dynamic so drastically that Haruta, who had been toying with life and death a moment ago, now finds himself on the receiving end of the most satisfying beatdown in the entire series. And we feel this way not just because we as an audience hate him, because, okay, we do, it's because the narrative has earned it. Robert McKee explains that catharsis in storytelling comes from proportional payoff. If an antagonist creates suffering, the resolution must therefore deliver an emotional counterbalance. Every moment of Nanami's methodical destruction of Haruta is laced with weight. Its movements feel inevitable, like fate correcting a horrible mistake. And yet, this catharsis doesn't erase the tension. The victory doesn't undo the damage Haruta has done, nor does it resolve the deeper anxieties lingering in the background. This is what makes Jujutsu Kaisen, for me anyway, such a compelling story. It understands that violence may be satisfying, in this case very satisfying, but seeing Nanami indulge like he did in the hate of the moment all but convinced me another fate was destined for him. Thankfully, this time, he was able to walk away. In a story defined by the effects of a world without Gojo, my first thought when looking at Mei Mei stare down the imposter unflinchingly was a throwaway moment from Hidden Infantry Episode 1, where Gojo describes Mei Mei as strong. Not talented, not useful, not promising. Strong. At the time, I didn't think much of it because Mei Mei carries herself that way, leading me to assume that her confidence and Gojo's description of her stemmed from a formidable curse technique like Gojo's strength did. But in this arc, we learn it doesn't. She can just control ravens? Not monstrous curse manipulations, just birds. Striking fear into the hearts of worms and rubbish bins everywhere, I'm sure. And yet Gojo said it, and this fight exposes precisely why. Mei Mei is a utilitarian through and through, a cold realist who believes that strength is the most important metric to consider above all. But if that's how she measures the world, where does that leave her? Does she believe she's strong because she meets Gojo's metric or the broader society standard? Well, Mei Mei walks into the tunnel like she owns the place. Calm, clinical, composed. But the moment she's faced with a curse-wielding Geto's technique, we see for the very first time cracks start to form on her once composed expression. And for a character as confident as Mei Mei usually is, that flicker of doubt would traditionally signal an end. But it doesn't. When faced with worsening circumstances, dwindling options, and a significant limitation to her already unimpressive curse technique, she doesn't panic, using her Raven not just as a weapon, but as a diagnostic tool to test her hypothesis. She thinks, she adapts, and most importantly, she collaborates. Because while she refuses to accept help in fighting a curse, she's perfectly willing to work with her brother to dismantle the domain, trapping them both. And he's not strong, not conventionally at least. He's not a frontline fighter, but he has his own skill set, his own strength, and Mei Mei recognizes that, not out of sentiment, but out of an acknowledgement of truth. This is what makes her strong. Because strength in this world isn't singular. It's not a stat, it's not a bloodline, it's not about crushing everything in your path. It's about knowing your limits, playing to your strengths, and trusting others to do the same. Gojo didn't call Mei Mei strong because she had a god-tier technique. He called her strong because she maximized everything she had, and in a world without Gojo, that's the only kind of strength that matters. The way a fight begins often determines the weight it can carry, and Yuji isn't carried to the showdown with Choso through strength alone, but through the hands of those who helped to carry him there. After battling Awasaka, Megumi is there to retreat with the wounded Ino. Inumaki arrives just in time to help evacuate civilians and clear Yuji's conscience as he presses deeper into the Shibuya underground. But fundamentally, Yuji is there fighting for a brighter tomorrow due to a promise born of a dying man's words.
You're a strong kid, so try to help others. Save the people you can, even if it's only those closest to you.
Even with the world collapsing all around him, even with Gojo sealed and the strongest fighters falling one by one, Yuji presses forward. Conversely, Choso isn't there through a sense of moral obligation. Where Yuji's driving force is to save as many people as he can, Choso is there to kill one specific person. And it just so happens he's looking right at him. Absorbing the consequences of this attack, while brutally effective, it served as an elegant reminder of the dynamic enjoyed with Megumi moments prior and the inversion of the benefit exposed during Mei Mei's fight. I hate to surprise you, but Yuji is not really the strategizing type. He isn't as observant as Megumi, and now, quite literally, the gap left by his absence is fully felt. But just as things begin to take a turn for the worst, a steady, reassuring voice cuts through the tension, and it's Mekamaru. Ooh, okay. There to lend assistance not by random chance, but because he chose Yuji. Once again, in a world without Gojo, Yuji finds salvation through another's reliance on him. And the plan Mekamaru devises is unlike anything Yuji would be ever capable of cultivating. Leveraging Choso's one emotional weakness, Mekamaru baits Choso into the bathrooms where he's instructed Yuji on how to turn this battlefield into a weapon. But there is a cost. Yuji now has to go it alone from here on out. What follows is one of the most technically brilliant hand-to-hand fights I think I've ever seen committed to animation. It's not about strength, it's about tempo, about misdirection, about who sees the opening first. And on more than one occasion, I thought the fight was totally done for, and so forget the edge of my seat. By the time this fight was reaching its zenith, I was firmly placed in my driveway. However, interestingly, the most important part of this fight isn't evident through the physical. It's what Yuji is thinking during these dire circumstances. He's not trying to be the one to save Gojo, he's not trying to escape, he's just trying to stop this one curse user. It's a profound moment of humility, a reminder that Yuji doesn't fight for glory or himself, he fights because someone has to. And then, it ends. I'm sorry, what the fuck? In an arc that's been driving home the virtues of teamwork, this one moment thunderously emphasizes that while invaluable, teamwork isn't a guaranteed victory. But just as Sukuna's return seems all but inevitable, Akutami swerves like a madman. Looking past Yuji, Choso starts to see something that isn't there, and I'm like, what the fuck am I seeing right now? It's like an invasion of memories, a childhood he never had, a brother he never met, and so confused and, at this point, his emotional wit's end, Choso stumbles off, leaving Yuji in the most precarious of circumstances, utterly decimated. I've not made it any secret over the last couple of weeks how much I resonate with and love Maki's character. Since her introduction, she's been defined not by her limitations, but by how she denies their very existence. However, as the present circumstances continue to spiral and the caliber of enemies continue to exceed what many of them were prepared for, Maki is forced to reckon with a question that has haunted her since she was born. Do I belong here? What follows pushes Maki to confront that very question, whether she likes it or not. What begins as the standard chorus Maki has grown accustomed to dismissing, orders to retreat and insults to her ability, eventually give way to a sobering reality in the form of Dagon and eventually the domain he summons. What would normally be the staging ground for a dramatic final battle instead stands as a monument that confirms Maki's deepest insecurities. Within this domain, Dagon divided his cursed energy in order of priority, most threatening to least. 70% dedicated to the elitist Nobito, 30% to the reliable Nanami, and Maki? Goose eggs. She doesn't even register to Dagon as a threat. And as the time pushes forward, slowly we start to see something happen to Maki that we've never seen before. We see doubt in her eyes. For the first time in her life, she starts to believe that maybe she doesn't belong here. But in truth, this moment of despair, or doubt if you want to call it that, this is what I've been waiting for more than anything else. As I've said before, since the beginning of the story, Maki has been presented as an ass kicker to end all ass kickers. One that rarely questions herself or fails to meet the targets that she sets. But all of that is meaningless if you can't remain true to who you are in the face of insurmountable doubt. It's in these moments of intense reckoning that we discover who we truly are. And thankfully, Maki does not know how to say, I give up. I won't lie, that was cool and all, but given that it looked like Nanami and Nobito were done for, I didn't exactly know how Maki was going to, deal with this. Then, something that filled me with absolute euphoria took place. Megumi came back, and he's not there to fight for her, he's just there to facilitate another inventive form of support, figuratively tossing her a very powerful cursed weapon and placing her back on even footing by nullifying the I can't miss effect of his domain. It's such a cathartic never say die sequence where everyone bands together in the face of certain death, all the while Megumi pours his all into creating an escape. Oh my god, 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 it's him! Megumi's fucking dad is here! It's Toji! And take it, I most certainly will, sir. While to us, this entrance switches up the dynamic dramatically, for someone like Maki, this changes potentially her entire life. Toji is what she wants to be. No cursed energy, no inherited technique, just pure, overwhelming rejection of limitation. For someone like Maki, who spent her entire life being told what she can't be, seeing Toji tear through a curse they all struggle to collectively contain doesn't just inspire her, it frees her. And the implications this has for the wider story is nothing short of earth-shattering. As explained during Hidden Inventory, the loss of Toji eliminated the possibility of taking the humane path towards a world without curses and ultimately pushed Geto down the genocidal path he ultimately took. If Maki could acquire all that Toji achieved, it would not only reopen this once lost path again, but could demonstrate that the most vital element to what defines the strongest isn't power, it's the refusal to accept the limits others place upon you. Or not. Holy fucking balls. This moment left me speechless. Not because I was shocked, really, but because it felt like a mistake, even though it absolutely wasn't. In a moment that was as unceremonious as it was fleetingly and disarmingly brief, Jogo sets ablaze Maki, Nobito, and Nanami, not because they were a threat, heck, they hardly registered as that, they were simply a couple of flies in Jogo's way as he swats them, en route to the real reason he was there. And in effect, this served, for me anyway, as the single most effective prelude to what I believe is undoubtedly the most impressive scene of the entire series. Not just because it's compelling, but because it did something I've not seen pulled off in any form in any other story I've covered.
Do not waste my time any longer!
I'll give you 1 second. Move.
In an arc filled to the brim with genius show-stealing moments, this one, quite fittingly, stands head and shoulders above the rest. I state this now at the front not with the aim of inspiring a debate through misplaced hyperbole or in the hopes that I can artificially dramatize the closing moments of this video review. I say this simply because it's true. Throughout this entire season, one man has remained the curse's singular focus, Satoru Gojo. Since his birth, Gojo's power forced the fiercest curses into hiding, robbing them of their agency, clipping their fangs before they could bite. But most crucially, on a meta level, Gojo didn't just dominate the story and its characters, he distorted our perspective as viewers, becoming the lens through which all other power was measured. An outcome Akutami not only orchestrated with clinical precision, but leverages here to stunning effect and consequence. Consider this. Prior to the seismic clash which kicked off this evening of Halloween havoc, Satoru Gojo, as he exists today, has participated in 2 combat scenarios really. In episode 7 of season 1, Jogo makes the ill-advised and soon-to-be deeply regretted decision of confronting Gojo head-on in a battle of strength. Both in story and for us reading, this contest serves as Yuji and our first substantial taste of high-level sorcery, while serving the secondary function of demonstrating how effortlessly powerful someone like Gojo truly is. However, there was a substantial tertiary impression left behind that went unnoticed until just a moment ago. Due to the makeup of this beatdown, the dialogue exchanged, and its humiliating conclusion, without realizing it, Akutami had shaped my impression of Jogo. So much so that by the time this arc's second clash between them had concluded, I viewed him more as a lackey and less like the special grade curse he actually is, and honestly, that felt normal. And in most shonen, that's the pattern. Enemies rise, terrify, and are later defanged by stronger forces. But what happens when you introduce the most dangerous entity in the series, not as a threat, but as a joke? What if, instead of directly instilling the viewer with fear and respect for this character, you undermine their will, influence, and strength, and in the process rob them of the demonic air they demand? What happens then? The answer, truthfully, is nothing, until that imbalance violently corrects itself. The Hasaba sisters, the children Geto rescued in the Hidden Infantry arc, reappear here in an act of desperation that's as tragic as it is ironic. They claim loyalty to Geto's mission, yet their actions contradict the very foundation of his ideology. Geto's hatred for non-sorcerers wasn't a core principle, but rather a tragic side effect. Foundationally, Geto was driven by a belief that unchecked cursed energy was the root of humanity's suffering. His ultimate dream was that of a world without curses, and yet these sisters, in desperation to bring someone they love back, attempt to summon the single greatest cursed spirit in existence. And when the chips were down, these sisters proved that it wasn't their belief in Geto's ideals that dictated their heinous actions, it was their love for him. A love that was willing to betray everything Geto stood for. It's a beautifully tragic beat, one that mirrors the larger structural inversion of the episode itself. Just as Akutami manipulates our perception of Jogo, he subverts the expectation that these girls are continuing Geto's legacy, when in actuality, they extinguish his memory. By neutralizing the unstoppable force of this story in Gojo, Akutami silently and inconspicuously set in motion a ticking time bomb. Distracted by how impressive all the others in this story were performing and how often the likes of Yuji would continue to exceed expectations, I neglected to notice the quiet ticking of a narrative bomb's clock until it was too late. And when that bomb did go off, the story didn't just force us to shift our perspective. With a single glare, Sukuna demanded it. And by the time I had realized what Akutami had just managed to do, I was already firmly on my knees, in total shock and acceptance of this brand new status quo. It is a masterclass in power creep management and the reorientation of viewer perspective. By flipping this traditional shonen trope onto its head, Akutami crafted a uniquely perfect villain rebirth. Akutami just hit the reset button, and it is terrifying. I'll see you all next week for the second half of this arc.
Ha 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 ha!